Welcome to the Coaching You Up podcast, the show where we dive deep into leadership coaching and development, as well as personal and professional growth. We will explore real-time solutions to workplace challenges and overall professional growth. Whether you're an aspiring leader, executive leader, celebrity with influence, or just a curious learner, we've got you covered. Join Dr. Jumani Sledge, national leadership expert with over 3 decades of leadership experience, as we bring you bi-weekly episodes. Expect in-depth analysis, parking lot conversations, light humor, and amazing guests. Hit subscribe and like and tune in. Let's transform our professional performance as we learn and grow together.
Welcome, growth family, to another episode of the Coaching You Up podcast. I'm excited to talk about today's topic. By the way, I am Jumani Sledge. I am your host, and I'm excited to talk about today's topic, one of the most, misunderstood and misinterpreted topics, but yet the most essential catalyst for growth, and that is failure. I'm going to share some personal experiences centered around failure, and also some different types of tools and tips and strategies and different lens for you to look through some maybe past missteps, misfortunes, and or just complicated situations that you may have found yourself in. So let's get into it. So when you talk about failure, there are several different individuals who talk about their experiences with failure, and we oftentimes quote them and we have information from them. In fact, one of the things I did was I put together a little list of, pop culture top quotes around failure. And let's see if you can guess who said this. The first one is, "We may encounter many deficits or defeats, but we must not be defeated." Sound familiar? Maya Angelou. You can't let your failures define you. You have to let your failures teach you. My forever president, Barack Obama. Failure is another stepping stone to greatness. Any thoughts? Oprah Winfrey. Okay, this is the easy one for you. You'll probably get this one. "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Shout out to the great Michael Jordan. Okay, so you didn't get Michael Jordan, you didn't get Barack, you didn't get Oprah. Let's see if you get this one. The reality is, sometimes you lose, and you're never too good to lose. You're never too big to lose. You're never too smart to lose. It happens. Any thoughts? Beyonce. All right, so as you can see, many famous, successful people have experienced failure in their careers, and yet they have not allowed that to stop them nor to defeat them. One of the things that I think is important for us to be able to do is reframe what we think about failure, to reframe the conversation and understand that it is a tool for growth. It is a necessary evil in some instances to give you an opportunity to look at yourself through another lens and to ask yourself very pertinent and pivotal questions and to fully understand your why. So in this episode, we'll talk about how to reframe it, strategies to look at you being able to see yourself differently. And then most important, we'll look at, in fact, I'll share a story with you about some of my personal failures and some of my challenges that will hopefully motivate you and also give you a sense of understanding. I'm very passionate about this particular work, especially this topic when you talk about failure, because many people will only assign to you the failure. They won't assign to you the lessons learned, the next steps, or the triumph. So when you are a leader or an overachiever, failure hits differently because you're probably conditioned to always win, to always excel. And so when you fall short of that, it does something to you mentally, right? And I'm not a therapist. Newsflash, I'm not a therapist. I'm just a guy from Detroit who's done this leadership work for a number of years, and I get it, right? And oftentimes you don't have individuals to whom you can talk to have a conversation around what is stifled or impacted or what decisions went into your mind prior to the failure, or even unpack the lessons learned from the failure. So we have to get into it. I think it's important to make sure that whatever seat you occupy, whatever role you take as a professional, that you have somebody along with you on the journey that you can speak with freely and openly about you and being yourself. You should be able to lay bare what some of those concerns are. And that's why coaching is so essential. That's why mentorship is so essential to help, especially for young professionals, especially for professionals and leaders who represent the underrepresented class of individuals, right? There are times where we find ourselves as the only or as the first, and believe it or not, in 2025, as maybe 2 of 20, right? And so, and I'm still shocked that those statistics exist when you talk about minority leadership, and to push the envelope a little further when you talk about minority male leadership, or I'll just name it, Black male leadership. It just looks differently in many organizations. And so one of the things that, individuals don't understand is that you can fail forward. And when you talk about failing forward, it's failing into that community, that support systems that help you identify what's next. You don't have to get stuck. You don't have to become hostage to that environment or to that failure, excuse me. It is important to persevere. And we'll talk about some tips a little later about, like, how do I persevere? The world is falling around. I'm losing a job. I'm losing money. I'm losing my family. I'm losing my marriage as a result of a failure. How do we turn that around? How do we grow? And mind you, there's not a one-shot bullet or solution to this. Else we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'll be somewhere on a private island, like really, really wealthy. But there are things that we can do, and there are relationships that we can build to push it to the next level. One of the things that failure allows us to do is really have an opportunity to lean into our blind spots, right? Sometimes how we see ourselves and how we show up may be a mismatch. Now, here's where I want you to lean in. When I say it's a mismatch, I'm not saying that you don't belong. I'm not saying that you don't fit. I'm saying that how people perceive you may not be reflective of what you're trying to convey. And sometimes it takes failure to open up that lens or to take that lid off of that, so you can really do the work that's necessary to grow and to develop. Now, here is the thing about growth. And this is the thing that particularly makes me uncomfortable in a number of clients that I've had in the past. One organization comes to mind where there was a situation where we were talking about growth and we were talking about development of certain leaders. And it was positioned as if the leaders were unwilling to grow or did not have the capacity to grow. And really what the employer was trying to get was them to conform. And you have to understand that you cannot expect someone to show up every day and conform to a culture that they may not be familiar with, or that they may feel outside of a paycheck doesn't add value to them. The flip side of the argument is employers say, if I'm paying you, you show up and you assimilate to this culture and you better make it work. So it takes an individual a strong sense of emotional intelligence. It also takes an individual with a strong sense of self to know when and where and how to engage along those dynamics. I remember a time when I was in an organization and I was excited, I was new, I was fresh out, and I was like, I'm gonna make a difference. This is my first big principalship. And there was certainly a cultural mismatch, right? One, I was this young, vibrant, excited leader going into this place where it was just like they weren't happy to receive a new leader, right? And so and especially a Black male leader. And again, it's one of those first type deals. And so I spent some time like really self-mutilating, right? And when I say self-mutilating, I want you to listen carefully. I spent time injuring myself, trying to rewire myself. And I'm in my 20s, back then, not now, obviously, but I was in my 20s trying to reinvent myself, trying to figure out how to fit in, trying to understand and lean into this culture where I knew that there was a mismatch. I knew fundamentally the ideology didn't represent my upbringing. And while I was open and receptive to learning more, the more I tried to learn, the worse I felt. The more I tried to lead in that dynamic, the less happy and fulfilled I was. And my mental really suffered. And I suffered as a result of it because you can only reconfigure yourself so many times to try to be in a place that may not welcome you. So when you talk about a failure and you talk about understanding how to prevent a failure, sometimes you just have to identify and be courageous enough to know when to go, or have enough self-regard to know this is not the best environment for me. Now, in that particular scenario I just shared with you, being a young leader and fresh out the gates and having the credentials and having the opportunity, you don't even think about walking away, right? And you're getting a little bag. So you don't necessarily think about walking away. So it hits differently. And that's why it's so important for young leaders, new leaders, to make sure that they have coaching and mentoring in place. Hence the Coaching You Up podcast. This, by and large, is my contribution to those who come after me and those who find themselves in similar situations as a means to grow. Unfortunately, when I was coming through the ranks, I had some mentors, obviously, but different types of mentors because their experiences were of a different era. So I had very good financial mentors who taught and understood and sold important to me about how to handle my finances, which was really great. I also had great mentors who just like taught me people dynamics, right? This is how you want to impact or deal with these types of people. And then I had a lot of spiritual leaders and influences that made sure I was anchored and honed down on my value system, and that I always understood and took time out to be grateful, thankful, and appreciative for the blessings that I had. So here's another thing. In addition to blind spots that failures uncover, and I'm actually reading from my notes this morning, you have to really, really understand that failure does lead to learning. It's one of those things, and again, you have to be introspective to see this and to do this work, where you go back and you ask yourself how or why. How or why did this happen? How or why did I end up in this situation? What's going to be the outcome of this? What are my next steps? So I'll give you an example. One of the things, and another piece where I wasn't such a young leader, but more or less a seasoned leader, I made and I tell this story when I'm working with different groups of people. I always talk about Mr. Bad Choice. It's something I learned from, shout out to Marva Collins. Mr. Bad Choice sometimes enters your head and he or she tries to make you distracted by this cord, try to make you make some decisions that are not in your best interest, or that you just absolutely shouldn't make, or are wrong. And so I had a situation as a senior leader where I was confronted with a moral dilemma, and I absolutely failed. I blew it. I knew it was wrong. I'll give you the fast forwarded version. I got involved in something that I absolutely should not have gotten involved in, but for fear and not really having a strong regard for thinking through or having someone to talk through, I succumbed to the indecent proposal. And as a result of that, I was impacted by the criminal justice system. And I own that, and I did my time, and I took the necessary steps to rebuild. I also made sure that I was accountable on the fronts of the criminal justice system and to the community and the stakeholders who were impacted. And so as a result of all of that, I leave this experience with, of course, still being who I am, but suffering great loss. And one of those losses includes actually having a felony charge. And so you go, here's this leader who has had all these different experiences, even an Ivy League experience. Shout out to Princeton. I'll talk more about that in a few seconds. And you find yourself as a just impacted individual. And for me in that moment, I had not had the tools or the skill sets or the courage to sound the alarm. I gave in. Huge failure. Huge failure. And as a result of that, while I'm in the situation, I'm not being cooperative with the feds. And so, shout out Detroit. I'm not snitching. I'm not talking. And so it made matters even worse. The lessons learned in that are insurmountable. The losses from that were insurmountable. The main takeaway from that was to make sure that you always stay true to yourself. And there's no amount of money, there's no position, there's no power that's worthy of you jeopardizing your name. And I knew that because the Bible tells me over and over again that a good name, right? So it's stuff I know. But in the moment, being confronted with the moral dilemma, I knew, but I didn't obey. And sometimes disobedience results in failure. And so what happens afterwards? Of course, you have to try to rebuild, reinvent. And so I spent an inordinate amount of time not trying to allow the failure I experienced to be assigned to me or to define me. It was important for me to take control of the narrative and to do the work necessary so that when people do hear my name and when people do see me, that I'm measured as a result of what I bring to the table and what I have to offer. And so much time passed beyond that, and being able to reinvent and do the work is something that allowed me, once again, to be able to share with individuals that it can happen for you. You can rebound from a failure. Now, mind you, I don't advise anybody to become involved with the criminal justice system because rebounding looks a little differently coming from that angle. But my message or my point is that it is possible. And so anyone watching this podcast, understand that it's impossible, that it is possible for it to happen for you. The other piece of that is when you really know that something doesn't work for you or that something doesn't align with you, be courageous enough to say, whoa, this ain't me. It is okay to walk away. It's better to walk away with a good name than to walk away being compromised and have to fight for your name. So this is another point that I want to talk about. And I just want to be vulnerable with you all because I trust the Coaching You Up pod and family and community. As a growth community, I think it is important also to make sure that we identify tools or frameworks that will help us get around failure, or not even get around failure. That's a bad choice of words, but to help us fully understand and unpack failure. And the first is there's a 3R model: reflect, reframe, and reset. And another experience, fun fact. So I go to apply for grad school, and of course I want this doctorate degree. And so upon the first application and trying to get in, I was denied. Huge failure, because I'm like the smart guy. I'm like the 4.0. I'm like, the guy that's always been like in like honors and AP. So this is like, how do you tell me no? And mind you, I was really, really young once again. And so I walked away from that experience thinking that I just wasn't smart enough and that I'd never be able to earn a terminal degree. And so I was depleted. I was disappointed. And remember, I told you, hearing a no or failure hits differently for individuals who are overachievers or strong leaders. And so as a result of that, I flushed it out. I meditated on it, and I had enough sense to pick up the phone, and I called to ask for feedback, because now that I've been denied, I'm gonna do it. I'm going again, right? I'm on now. It's on. Let's go. And so as a result of that, I called to get feedback. And when I called the institution, I was told that, I didn't realize that you were not admitted. I'm looking at my records and it shows you are admitted. Something is afoot here. And so fast forward, we go through and we learned that about 80% of I think it was 80% of African Americans who applied were rejected or denied, right? Now, mind you, while I say 80%, that's a huge number, but it's only a small number of African Americans who apply overall. And so the person with whom I spoke said, come and see me, let's have a conversation. And this individual went on to tell me how to reapply and show up for the program. But before reapplying, it was important that I took 6 credit hours of courses that I could take as I think it was like a post grad or something like that. And so I did. And so one of the courses happened to be the chair of the curriculum and instruction committee that I took that course. And so while I was in the course and we're dividing up and saying in the groups, of course, nobody wants to work, because I'm like, it's like 3 Black women and me, and everybody else is different. And so no one wanted me in the group and that sort of thing. And I was cool with that. And so once we turned in the first assignment, my assignment was used as an exemplar. And so the professor went on and on and on, the same professor who denied me, mind you, went on and on and on and on and on. And then comes around maybe about 3 or 4 weeks into, post the midterm, comes around and says, you really need to think about furthering your education. And I go, well, I attempted to, and, I didn't get into the doctoral program. Well, I would love for you to get into the doctoral program, and I would love to be your advisor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so fast forward, I did. But in addition to that, I was offered another opportunity within that doctorate program to be able to have a cognate hybrid, right? At Princeton University, because Princeton at this time, they were in partnership with Wayne State, and I got a leadership certification from Princeton. So I was able to get an Ivy League experience as a result of the doctorate experience. And one of the things that I like to share about that story is, if I had stopped at the no, if I would have let the rejection define me or defeat me, I would have never gone on to pursue my academic interests and have additional credentials that I wanted and that I longed for, right? So don't let the no define you is another takeaway. Always go back and unpack, and shout out to Dr. Tillis, rest in peace, who coached me through that process, because mentoring again is very important, and coaching again is very important. Shout out to her for having enough courage to be able to support me through that sponsorship is very important. Consistent sponsorship is important, right? Because some people will sponsor you and mentor you and ghost you. And so you have to make sure you're able to navigate that space and make sure that all pieces are in. So 3R model: reflect, reframe, reset. I know we're running up against time. And then there's a grow coaching model, right? Grow is an acronym for goal, reality, options, and way forward. What's your goal? What's your current reality? What options do you have? And what's your way forward? This one is particularly tricky, and it really, really impacts you when you're in the mix of the day-to-day work and the day-to-day flow. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? How do I want to go about it? Is it political? Is it social? Is it about the work? What's my reality? What will constituents look for? And when you talk about your reality, you always have to make sure it's not just the audience that you see, but it's also the audience that you don't see. So what will stakeholders say? What will individuals in executive leadership say? What might the CEO say? What might people to whom I have the responsibility of supervising say? You have to factor in all lenses to be able to truly assess the reality. And then what options do I have? Now, if I take too big of a stand, and we kind of talked about that on the previous episode where we had shout out to Jewel on the previous episode, who actually talked about like, what is the risk factor? What options do I have? Am I going to blow the spot up? Or am I going to strategically come up with a front to be able to win? And then finally, what your way forward is. And so one of the things that I want to say to leaders in different environments where you have aspiring leaders, where you have leaders that may not be experienced, and where you have leadership that's not reflective of the demographics in the organization. And I'm not talking about in a disproportionate manner. I want to be very clear. If it's disproportionate, it's not reflective, right? Representation does matter, but also we have to begin to push that forward and really look at the equity lens. And yes, I'm still on the equity lens. Yes, it still matters in 2025. I don't care what they say in DC, it matters. So the way that leaders, I think, have a moral responsibility to normalize failure and to normalize missteps is to, one, they themselves, of course, model the transparency. And then two, and this is the most important piece, presidents, CEOs, chiefs, executives, directors, to whom it may concern, you have to build cultures of learning versus cultures of perfection. That's really, really tough to do. It was tough for me to do as a leader, I'll be honest, because remember, I'm wired to be like an overachiever. And so I want the thing right. And I want the thing to be excellent. That's all I know. So I don't have time to like guide you all the way through it. And I had to learn later on as opposed to earlier on. Not that I just want this beautiful project, but I also want the person that worked diligently on the project to feel fulfilled as well. And so as a leader, it's important for me to create a culture of learning. How do we do this together? How can we collaborate? Collaboration is so important. And how could we be transparent with one another? It's okay to say, Dr. Sledge, that's just too much and I can't. And I have to say, I know it's a lot. Where can I help you? And not, I've seen this a lot lately in leadership, in many different organizations. Happy to help. How can I help you? As words, as opposed to what do you need for me to do for you or with you right now? Don't offer to help if you're not going to take the action. Don't say, I'm happy to help you, and I put it out there what you want, what I need help with, and you say, okay, call so and so. You're not helping. The offer alone is not helping. Cultures of learning versus cultures of perspective, and then the importance of storytelling from vulnerable leadership. As I demonstrated today on today's call, just talking about, and I thought it was important for me to be able to do this on the podcast also, because one of the things I even still experience from missteps is people not being fond of me, obviously, because I have a felony and I do get hate mail, non-criminal, non-sexual, non-violent, non-sexual, etc. But I still get hate mail. People still feel like I'm less than because I'm just as impacted. And so it's important that and people still feel that I'm less than and just because, right? And so you have to have a sense of strength and courage to be able to be vulnerable and to be able to put your story out in truth. And I invite each of you to spend some time and actually think about like what failures you have, what you're experiencing right now in the workplace. Let's have a conversation. Feel free to email me. You could drop me a question, drop me a note. dr.sledgecoaching@gmail.com. You'll see it on the thing back there. Feel free, drop me a note. Also, if you take a look at our Coach You Up shop, you'll find that there's an opportunity for one-on-one conversation and engagement. And so feel free to grab one of those coaching sessions. We can have a conversation and go deeper if there's something that you're experiencing or you want to share. Before we go, I do want to leave this with you. Here's some pieces that you need to consider in your workplaces and as you're going about doing the work that you do and hopefully do so well, is that sometimes it's not necessarily you as an individual, but you have to be willing to really look at, and this is, I want to do this primarily for other African-American men, because when Black men struggle in their leadership roles, it's really due to a lack of talent, right? Or intelligence or ambition. It's sometimes just systemic barriers, right? And we have to be able to have real conversations about that. One of the systemic barriers that continues to show its head, and this is not just for Black men, Black women experience this as well, as the unconscious biasness and stereotyping. Sometimes how people perceive you as, and I'll read what it says here, then I'll translate into like Detroit terminology. But Black men are often unfairly perceived as aggressive, unapproachable, or threatening, especially in positions of authority. These stereotypes can limit opportunities and undermine your leadership legitimacy. Facts. Now, here's the Detroit version. Some people just gonna point you out to be the bad guy. You know, you're gonna be the Boo Radley. Shout out to Killer Mockingbird, right? You're just gonna be Boo Radley. And white fragility is just gonna prevail. And even the people who say, I get it, I understand, I know that you're not like that, but they think, I'm sorry. The truth of the matter is, in many environments, white fragility wins, especially if you have a Black man or a Black woman giving orders and lead, not even giving orders, but leading in different types of ways. It shows up. And what do you mean when you say unconscious bias? Quick, well, I don't have time for a quick story, but I'm reminded of a time where I was organizing and hosting an event in Detroit, and I was bringing leaders from all across the country into Detroit. And one of the persons said to me, "Why do we have to do that to Detroit? Do you all have Wi-Fi? Do you have broadband?" Well, I'm like, how dare you, right? Because Yes, we're civilized city, and we do have those things. And the unconscious bias was, of course, that you all could no way possible keep up with what you should keep up with from the IT landscape, because after all, you're in Detroit. So sometimes it's just based on geography. Sometimes it's based on just the color of your skin. And that's a reality, right? And people feel threatened. Remember Emmett Till? Okay. The lack of advocacy, I think, is important. Um, Mentoring is I'll read what it says and I'll give you the Detroit version, right? Mentors are helpful, but sponsors, people who actively open doors, are crucial for advancement. A lot of times you have individuals who are challenged and struggle because the level of advocacy is not there vis-a-vis sponsorship, right? If you got to get in by yourself and you don't necessarily have a sponsor, it's it's going to be more difficult. That's just the reality of it. And so it's important for those of us who have influence, who have opportunities, to make sure that we pay it forward. The other piece, and this is one that really hits home for me, and that's the isolation in leadership spaces. Many Black male leaders find themselves as the only one in the room. That isolation can lead to a lack of limited collaboration, burnout from carrying the weight of representation. And when I say the only one, I'm not always talking about just in terms of quantity of physical being, but also mindset. Because all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And remember I talked about that self-mutilation. One another stereotypes that comes to mind is what people may see you as big, black, and bold. Also tokenism, right? And so I'm not just so happy to be on the plantation. I'll do whatever and cheer everybody on to say, great job, good work. When you're in that vein, as a Black leader, oftentimes you win, and you win largely because you've been able to do things the way you feel you need to do them to survive, right? And then there's a cadre of individuals who have stronger convictions, who know that I have to be true to who I am. I have to say it like I mean it, but also be willing to demonstrate that I can help lift and build and motivate individuals. Last one, and this is the powerful one I'm gonna leave you with. Unfortunately, I have to leave on this note, but uh, the microaggressions and everyday racism, the daily toll of microaggressions can erode confidence, limit visibility, and contribute to disengagement or departure from the leadership ranks. Microaggressions and everyday racism. It's real, people. What do you mean, microaggression? We'll talk about that on a future episode coming up. But the short version of microaggression is where people are aggressive, have a tendency to be aggressive, and try to pretend that they're not being aggressive. Um, my mom would define it as like nice nasty, right? Taking shots and then going, oh, there must have been some miscommunication, or you didn't fully understand me, or I thought I was helping. Yeah, by CCing everybody. But again, that's a conversation for another day. I hope you've heard something that resonated with you today. Thank you so much again for tuning in to the Coaching You Up pod. I am JR Sledge. Until next time, we'll be dropping episodes every 2 weeks, gearing up with our guests, making sure that we have conversations that relate to you being your better self and also your professional growth. You can hit me up on one of the platforms. I think all the stuff is going to be showing on the screen in real time. And for my audio listeners, it's dr.sledge, SLEDGE, coaching at gmail.com. And then you can feel free to follow me on Instagram at Coaching You Up Now at Instagram. And the other channels and so forth will come in the outro. Again, hope you've heard something that resonated with you. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. I should have said that in the beginning, and I didn't. Like and subscribe. Hopefully you listen to this entire podcast. and found something that resonates with you. Until next time, have a good one. And I wanted to shout out for reading, and I typically do this, but there are two good books on the I know I've already given the closure, but before I go, to talk about failing and also to talk about confidence. And that's Will Packer has a new book out, Who Better Than You? Healthy Arrogance of Dreaming Big, right? It's a really, really good book. And then my neighbor and my friend in my head, Big Sean, has a good book, Go Higher. You probably can't see it because of the lighting, but this book I recommend 1,000%. 5 practices for purpose and success and inner peace. Big Sean did his big one in this book. Again, Big Sean, Go Higher. All this free advertising. We need to tag him in the podcast. Hopefully he'll come on as a guest one day, right? I'm dreaming big, Will Packer. But yeah, this book right here really blessed me over the past weeks. Big Sean, Going Higher, 5 practices and purpose. You really, really, really want to, if you get a chance, to pick that book up. It will certainly help you as you talk. And he even goes into some of his failures in the industry and what that looked like and the personal toll that it took on him. So it's really, really worth taking a look at. And I want to close with the words from the great poet laureate, and that is, wouldn't you know, we've been hurt, we've been down before. When our pride was on the hook, looking at what the world could be like, and we were like, where do you go? But know that we gonna be all right. Shout out to Kendrick Lamar. Peace, people. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching You Up pod. We hope today's conversation sparked new ideas, practical solutions, and fresh inspiration for your leadership journey. Remember, growth is a continuous process, and every step forward counts. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps us reach even more amazing leaders like you. Visit us at coachupnow.org for more information on coaching sessions. Join me, Dr. Jumani Sledge, every other week as we keep diving deeper into real-time workplace challenges and personal growth strategies. Until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep leveling up.